Bow, 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 bow. Welcome to yet another episode of the Born Free Network. We are the heirs of this democracy, and therefore, extremely important conversations need to be had. I am your host, Flex Rabaizi, and without any further ado, let's get straight into it. So, guys, today I'm a bit scared. I'm a bit nervous as I'm delivering this stream. This is largely because we're going to be touching on very sensitive information. The point of this video is I want to expose the secrets of South Africa, the 50-year secret plan to destabilize, destroy, and dominate South Africa. Now, guys, you need to understand that the history of South Africa does not start in 1994. The history of South Africa does not start in 1948, doesn't even start in 1910. South Africa has a very long and complex history. And so during this stream, I will seek to really dissect all of that history so that you guys can understand what we experience today is just the seeds of some things that were sown in antiquity. Everything that we are experiencing today is a result of someone's plan long ago, decades ago, for us to be in this position. So, what even led me to a point of taking on this investigation was when I came across the case of Nkosana Makate, right? So, for you guys who don't know who Nkosana Makate is, Nkosana Makate is the gentleman who invented the Please Call Me service, right? So he's currently in court battling it out with Vodacom because he contends that this is his intellectual property. And he used to be an employee of Vodacom. And during the time, he had a verbal agreement in place with the management that if this particular service does well, he is entitled to a share. Now, if you are not born yesterday, you have probably made use of the Please Call Me service. Please Call Me has made billions of rands, even through their ad revenue, because you've seen that every Please Call Me has an advert at the bottom, right? So this video is not about that, but that is a very important segue to help us understand the secret plans and secret deals that were done in private beaches and private hotels that we couldn't reach. So if you were born after the democratic age was ushered in South Africa, that would mean that you are younger than most of these plans. That would mean that you don't understand most of what's going on in South Africa right now, hence why I took it upon myself to truly understand what's going on. So the Nkosana Makate case, the last time that it was in court, was ruled upon by a gentleman called Justice Madlanga. Well, he was one of a group of people who are on the bench on the Constitutional Court, and they made a ruling about Nkosana Makate's case. Now, not to go too deep into this, but basically what they were doing is they're playing a ping pong where they keep shifting the responsibility for who must take the decision that will emancipate this black brother. Now, the more unsettling part about all of this is that this company, Vodacom, has an investor called the PIC. Now, I'm sure a lot of you South African people do not know what the PIC is because I also didn't know, guys. I'm not going to act fresh. So the PIC is the Public Investment Corporation. These guys are the guys that invest a ton of money, about $100 billion, and they're responsible for paying the government's employees' pension fund. They are responsible for paying the unemployment insurance fund, the workmen compensations fund, and all these other funds that are related to South Africa and the public services, right? So the PIC itself is one of the biggest investors in Vodacom. And the PIC is controlled by the South African government. The South African government's interests in the PIC are represented by the finance minister. So they hold about a 20%. No. Let me be real with you. about 16% share of Vodacom. The government owns about 16% of Vodacom. Now, if you know anything about business, you know that a 16% share is huge. They could sway the board in any direction that they need them to go. Specifically in the case of Nkosana Makate, who is a black South African man, due a payment of about 20 billion rands. So if the South African government was really focused on the empowerment of black people, like if they were to actually practice black economic empowerment, they would use their voting power as one of the biggest shareholders of Vodacom to get Vodacom to actually pay out to Nkosana Makate the 20 billion rands that's due to him. However, here's the catch. The ANC does not endorse any type of billionaire that does not have connections to them. The ANC is meant to be a gatekeeper to control any type of black person from becoming a billionaire if they do not have an affiliation to the ANC. So that's your black economic empowerment for you. They are meant to safeguard the status quo of the global financial elite. They are not on the side of the layman. Because right now, this case is pretty clear. This man has provided intellectual property that has generated billions in profits for Vodacom. Therefore, there is nothing to even discuss in this case. He's only due his payment, and the ANC should be pushing, using their power through the PIC to get the Vodacom to do that. So let me actually break that down again for you, because I know sometimes I can speak in riddles, guys. PIC, the Public Investment Corporation, is a 16% shareholder in Vodacom, one of the biggest shareholders of Vodacom at all. And right now, Vodacom is refusing to pay a black South African man 20 billion rand, which is due to him for the use of his intellectual property through the use of the Please Call Me service. The South African government is remaining quiet because they do not want to see a black billionaire being created out of actual hard work and self-determination and real agency. They only want black billionaires that they can every time control through blackmail, because they know how you obtained your wealth. So as I'm saying, South Africans are waiting for a David versus Goliath moment where Nkosana Makate gets his due payments from Vodacom. Judge Madlanga could have provided that by swaying the bench and telling them, guys, let's make a conclusive decision to get this man the payment that's due to him. So for me, it's pretty wild to expect that this same Justice Madlanga is going to make any type of robust judgments or any type of recommendations that are going to damn the accused by Mkhwanazi. All the accusations that Mkhwanazi has made are going to land at the desk of this man, the same man who has failed to conclusively deal with the Nkosana Makate issue, not because he did not know what he had to do, but because of the government's interests through their investments with the PIC. I hope that that's making sense for you, because my plan is not really to dwell on this. This was just the issue that actually sparked my interest. And therefore, because of that, we're going to go all the way back in time to the assassination of our president, all the way back in time, so that we can really understand what is going on and what are the secret plans and secret deals that dominate South Africa today. All right. So let's go back in our timeline. Guys, I love creating timelines for you, hey? And I heard that you want the timelines. I heard that you want me to share the timelines with you. So I will share the timelines with you. Don't worry. I will make sure that I do share these timelines with you. They'll be available for download. That's not a stress. All right. So let's get into the real part of the video right now. Because the Justice Madlanga part and the Nkosana Makate part was just a segue into us to really understand what's going on in South Africa, what are the powers at play, and why are we in the situation that we currently exist in. So I know this is wild to say, but listen here, South Africa. South Africans' history does not start in 1994. South Africa's history does not start with the ANC. It does not start with the DA. It doesn't even start in 1948 with apartheid. It goes way back. It goes back to Transvaal, Cape Colonies, Natal, goes before that as well. So it's very important for us to understand the previous happenings of our country so that we can have a clear understanding of why are we in the current position that we exist in. All right. So starting off with the ANC, I think that the ANC, we suffer a recency bias when we think about the ANC. We tend to think of them as this organization that was born in 1994 or in the late 90s or early 90s that just came through and took over the country and then started dominating. But the actual truth is, the ANC was formed 82 years before they actually got into power. The ANC got into power in 1994, but they were formed in the year 1912. That is very important to note. The ANC was formed in the year 1912, 82 years before they ever got into power. Extremely important to understand, because right now, as we're living in this democracy, 30 years of ANC rule, we've got Ramaphosa as a president. He's in his 70s. He himself is younger than the ANC. He himself is younger than the period that the ANC had to wait in order to get into power. So there's a story developing with that itself. But I need you guys to understand that nothing is just happening in a vacuum. Everything comes from somewhere, and everything that we are experiencing today is as a result of past deals that were made in antiquity, seeds that were planted decades ago. All right. So just for the sake of this video, though, so that you guys can follow the story closer and be able to have a better understanding, I'm not going to drag it all the way back to the 1400s or 1600s. I'm going to start it somewhere here in the mid 1900s, okay? And I think the best place for us to start it so that most people can have proper understanding is through the introduction of the apartheid regime, right? So, just for context, before the apartheid regime took over in 1948, the Afrikaners had just lost a war against the British called the Anglo-Boer War. It was fought twice. And so, as a result, they decided to form a secret society known as the Afrikaner Broederbond in the year 1918. And then 30 years later, they were able to infiltrate the government and then finally take power in 1948. So in 1948, they came with a lot of changes that were meant to economically empower the Afrikaner, and not just that, but to give more power to their goal of nationalization. Because understand this, the Afrikaners were people of all different sorts of groupings. There were some French involved, there were Dutch involved, some English, Italians, all types and groups of people were involved in the formation of Afrikaners. Do you understand? So when the Afrikaners came to South Africa, they decided they no longer wanted to have ties with their home countries. And that's where a growing sense of nationalism began. This is why you saw an Anglo-Boer war being fought, where the English, with their own interests, had to fight with the Boers. But fast forward here to 1948, which is where we are currently, on the timeline at least, right? This gentleman is very famous for being the architect of apartheid. His name is Hendrik Verwoerd, right? He also became the president of South Africa in the year 1958, right? So I told you guys, this is not a tabloid. This is a conversation of extreme importance. This is where we come to learn. This is where we come to share information with each other. And also, quick warning, if you are quick to be offended, this is not the stream for you, because here we come in with information that's going to challenge what you think you know. It's going to challenge your identity. So please tuck it in. Don't be too quick to be offended. Listen to the information, try and dissect it, try and understand it as best as you can. Also, please make sure that you like this video. Please make sure that you share this channel. Please make sure that you subscribe to this channel because we are sharing very sensitive information. So, of course, YouTube will have it limited. They don't want this type of information to be what's trending. They want information that continues to dull your IQ. But anyway, 1948, Hendrik Verwoerd got into power through the National Party, but he wasn't the president yet, as yet. He was still the head of propaganda. Okay, he was still the head of propaganda, and he was just a driving force behind formalizing and institutionalizing the whole idea of apartheid. Okay, and then moving forward, in the year 1953, there was something introduced called um, boom, the Bantu Education Act of 1953. So this is a very, very important part of the story because this is where your heroes are born. Heroes like your Tsietsi Mashinini, your Hector Peterson, even your Cyril Ramaphosa, all the students' rights activists of the time actually became active as a result of this particular act, the Bantu Education Act. Okay, things get very interesting here because the Bantu Education Act was a cause for a lot of infighting within South Africa. There were certain factions who truly believed that the Bantu Education Act sought to really limit blacks to inferior types of roles. But on the other hand, their argument was that was not our plan. South Africa's economy was at a place where we needed more people to have vocational skills and the ability to do handwork. Why do I say this? Look at South Africa now. Right now, South Africans can't do anything with their hands. That's why there's such an argument for illegal immigrants because illegal immigrants seem to have hand skills. They can do plumbing, they can do building, they can do electricity, all of the things that we as South Africans can't do because we were told that that's work for inferior minds. We should aspire to be writers of think pieces. We should aspire to be lawyers and doctors and professors. Whilst at the same time, you're just creating an economy of people who cannot do anything with their own hands, a consumer economy, an economy that's ready to hire people to fix their car, to fix their roof, to build their house, an economy of people who cannot do anything with their own hands. But when we were introduced to the Bantu Education Act in 1953, there was a total rejection of this act because there was a belief that this promoted us as Africans to do inferior levels of work. Now, the countries who were just free from colonialism and other types of oppression, countries like China, they chose to adopt a vocational syllabus for their people because this allowed them to be able to take control and build their own communities. Like, look at things right now. In South Africa, if we have an issue as a community, we can't even get together with our own engineers and build a bridge and fix it ourselves. This is because all we know how to do is pay for services. We don't know how to provide the services that keep a whole civilization going. And our own government uses that as an excuse to say, no, but there is a gap for unemployed, for illegal immigrants to come in because you South Africans can't do X, Y, Z, only for you to find that that's a result of a 1953 act, the Bantu Education Act. So let's actually read what the act said. The act was they wanted a shift to vocational and manual training. The act restructured Black education to emphasize practical skills over academic development. The curriculum prioritized subjects like needlework for girls, handcraft, planting, soil conservation, and basic arithmetic. Let's just start there. All right. Soil conservation, planting, needlework, these are all day-to-day skills that we need to have. Right now, we're talking about we want the land back. But how many of us are actually skilled in working the land? How many of us actually has a backyard garden right now as we're speaking? Are you raising any vegetables in your backyard garden? How can you do that when your whole life you were taught that you need to run away from manual work as a sign of intellectual development? Our whole media, our whole syllabus has convinced us that running away from manual labor is a sign of your intellectual development. Your inability to do anything with your own hands is proof of just how superior you are intellectually. And then in a situation like that, you find that we're going to have 70% youth unemployment. But the whole youth can write think pieces on Twitter. They can trend easily off of telling the whole world power of words. They are good at that. But if you ask them to change a tire or fix or replace a fan belt in your car, impossible. It's things that we cannot do. But when we see videos of Chinese children, children in the age of 9 and 10, fixing a phone, fixing a TV screen, we envy that. But we forget that it was the same liberation movements that convinced us that separating ourselves from manual work was a sign of intellectual development. But how did this even come to be? How did this even come to be? Now, that brings me back to the first point that I started with, which was the ANC. The ANC was founded in the year 1912, like I did mention. But who were the founders of the ANC? Who educated them? Who gave them the worldview that they had? That's a very important question that you're asking. So, Dr. Pixley Gaseme, John Langalbalele Dube, Solomon Blackie, two other gentlemen, these are the founders of the ANC. But very important to note is that John Langalbalele Dube went to school in Ohio, in America. He was globalized very early. He went to school in Ohio, in America. Pixley Gaseme went to Oxford University in England. He was riding horses in 1908. He was living his best life all the way in England, riding a horse, living his best life, while the people that he sought to free were here in South Africa, in Soweto, in Esho, in Kwanongoma, living the real life that he said he was coming to free them from. But he lived most of his life in England. So I think it's very important to understand that, or even Saul Plaatje, he was educated by a missionary. So missionaries represent a different interest in South Africa as opposed to the Boer. The Boer is a nationalist. The missionary is an internationalist or a globalist. He believes that the whole world should be open up and those who have the power and the financial resources to travel in between borders and go anywhere should do that, and those who can't should be wrecked by their governments. That's the basic belief of globalism. So, as we look at it's actually a very painful situation of unemployment right now. But how can you employ thinkers and poets and DJs and influencers, people who think that all of their powers is in their brain and none in their hands? But we're living in an industrial country. Some of the companies that contribute the most to South Africa's GDP are companies that manufacture things. But when we rejected the Bantu Education Act as being oppressive, we were basically saying that we want our intellect to only be in words. We don't want to be able to build anything. We don't want to be able to create anything. All right, so let's read further what the Bantu Education Act was saying, because also there's something that I want to bring forth here. There's something like the weaponization of language, right? I spoke briefly about this in my previous video. I say that if you take my patriotism and you call it xenophobia, you are weaponizing something which is positive. The act itself doesn't change, but the language around it makes you change the lens with which you view it from. So I think this is a skill that was very much mastered by the people who were seeking to destabilize the apartheid government. Now, you guys need to understand that I don't advocate for a return to apartheid in any sense. But all I can say is I want to advocate for the return to a government that actually cares about its people, cares about economic development, cares about job creation, cares about the protection of our borders, cares about family building. That's all I want. I don't care about anything else. But anyway, let's read what the words say. They say, right, basic arithmetic alongside social studies and Christian religion. Look, that, man, look at how wild that is. It was mandated into the education system that we should be taught religion. Now, in as much as we have our own religions as Africans, we practice our own religions. Right now, the current government is not promoting any religion. They're actually promoting godlessness as a way. Our current government does not care about God. They do not recognize any God, let alone a Christian God, a Hindu God. There's no God at all. And right now, we're looking at the same government that said we should reject this act. The same act that said that alongside planting, soil conservation, basic arithmetic, social studies, we ought to be taught about the Christian religion. They say that these were designed to prepare Black students for menial jobs, such as laborers, domestic workers, or farmhands, rather than professional or intellectual roles. Hendrik Verwoerd, Minister of Native Affairs, explicitly stated that the goal was to ensure Black people accepted no place in the European community above certain forms of labor. Now, it is very easy to debunk that. It is very easy to debunk that this is a lie. Why do I say this? I'm from Richards Bay, right? And if you know anything about Richards Bay, you will find that it's a place with a lot of factories. Okay? There's factories, there's mines. And the people who are doing the technical jobs in those factories and those mines, construction companies, you'll find that it's Afrikaner men. Why? Because they were given practical job skills. They did not seek academic development and intellectual prowess. They did not seek to be poets. They did not seek to contribute status updates to this world. They do actual jobs. So they are the ones who are artisans, they're technical engineers, they're all technically inclined. And we South Africans go to university, we get degrees, and these degrees are for social studies, psychologies, and things that cannot be applied in the workplace. The inability of our skills to be applied in the workplace is in direct correlation to the staggering unemployment rates that we experience today. So when an education act was actually built to ensure that we would have the skills that match the economy that we are a part of, we rejected that. Not that we didn't reject that. We didn't even know what was going on. But it was the elitist leaders of these liberation movements who were in bed with international financiers who convinced them that we cannot afford to have a population of people who can work for themselves, who can do work with their hands. Because the natural progression of being technical is you're going to be militarized. Once you know how to do and fix things with your own hands, your next biggest goal is to want to be able to protect yourself, protect what you have built, protect your family. And that's one thing that the ANC government has guarded against profusely. They will never allow the South African youth to militarize and organize themselves. That's why they have launched a systematic chemical warfare on all of us. We all think that groove is a culture and we love to drink, but groove is not a culture. We're drinking as a form of trauma. And if it's not the trauma, it's because the system is designed in a way that is going to drive us to want to drink. There's basically no benefit in remaining sober minded in this country because, in any case, the government is going to target you. But let's continue to read about the Bantu Education Act because remember, I'm trying to show you guys about the secrets of South Africa, the secret 60-year plan to destroy, destabilize, and dominate South Africa. That's what this video is about. The secret 60-year plan to destabilize, destroy, and dominate South Africa. And as you can see where I'm starting this video from, this is the year 1953 already. So I'm trying to show you the depth of the plans. Whatever you're experiencing now was planned decades ago. Your unemployment, your depression, your drug addiction, your confusion, your broken family, everything that you're experiencing now was planned decades ago. Everything that you're experiencing now was planned before I was born, before most people I know were born. And those that were born, they never got the chance to know the truth because there was so much propaganda being thrown from each side that you can never get to the actual truth of South Africa. So I hope that during this video, you are going to learn the secrets and the 50-year plan to destroy, destabilize, and dominate South Africa. See, the previous video that I did kind of got limited because I mentioned too many names and I mentioned too many organizations. So guys, please make sure that you like this video. Please subscribe to this channel. Please make sure that you share this video with anyone who might want to see something like this, because this type of information is obviously being limited. Not everyone is allowed to know that things like this are going on. But with that being said, let's go. So they said that this act was promoting ethnic division. They say that the curriculum emphasized tribal identities, teaching students about a supposed Bantu culture to cement ethnic divisions and discourage a unified Black identity. Again, weaponization of language. They want you as a Sotho man to not recognize that you are a Sotho man when you are standing next to another Sotho man. Because once you guys recognize that you have a deeper identity that connects you beyond this rainbow nation that's being created, that's when you're going to revolt and fight for your rights to self-determine. So when they say that the Bantu Acts was pushing ethnic division, that's not true. Why don't they call French people living in France and German people living in Germany ethnic division? Why isn't that ethnic division? Why is it only called tribalism if a Sotho man and a Tswana man want to recognize that they are Sotho and they are Tswana? But if a Spanish man and an Italian man want to recognize their separate differences that make them distinct characters, then all of a sudden that's good. But if it happens here in Africa, then that's tribalism. These are the things that we need to think about. You can be reading an English statement or an English paragraph, and because the words are weaponized to attack your mind, you're not even realizing that they're telling you about a good thing, but they're painting it out to be something negative. They're calling it ethnic division. It's actually quite funny. If it wasn't so sad, it would be funny that they would call that ethnic division. But it's actually the right to self-determination. One of the reasons why South Africa is just simply not working out as a country is because we have so many people with different ethnicities, different histories that brought about their being, but you're trying to put all these people under one leader who does not understand the different cultures and histories of every other leader. And I'm not speaking on behalf of one ethnicity. A Zulu leader won't work because they are Tswana people. A Tswana leader won't work because they are Xhosa people. A Xhosa leader won't work because they are Venda people. A Venda leader won't work because, of course, he's not working even now. So it's not because we're trying, really, in essence, to say that there's a certain ethnic group that is more suited to lead South Africa. I am recognizing that the Rainbow Nation itself perhaps does not work. And if we're trying to Europeanize ourselves so much, perhaps we should be trying to copy some of those patterns, like how they severed apart Europe. But anyways, let's continue to read what the Bantu Education Act is saying here. Right. So for those of you guys who don't understand what the Bantu Education Act was, let's just backtrack a little bit. I'm sorry, guys. I know I have to keep catching you up, but you can just throw it there in the comments if there's something that you feel like you don't understand, and I'll just run back to it. But the Bantu Education Act was actually an attempt by the government of South Africa at the time to combat the international influences that were prevalent in the textbooks. Now, let me tell you something right now. Right now, if the South African government were to say, we want to change the life orientation textbooks because we feel as if they have too much influence from maybe an international country, and we don't want to have that influence come into our children and control the way that they think. I would consider that to be a step taken by a government that cares about the future of its children. That's what I would think. I would think, oh wow, this government actually cares about the minds of their children and how they're being molded. Do you understand? So I would be like, okay, cool. You know what? I support that. So that's what the Bantu Education Act was doing. They thought that these books that were being printed in England with other publishing companies of other countries that didn't have the best interests of South Africa being an independent nation at the time, they felt like, okay, let's try and root that out, introducing the Bantu Education Act and getting people sped up from the missionary education, because missionaries are theologians, pastors. So the only thing that they're going to do is teach you how to think about things theoretically, spiritually, but they're not going to teach you how to shoot a gun. They're not going to teach you how to build a house, how to fix an engine, how to do electricity. They only are concerned about, I guess, issues of intellectualism for the sake of it, but not for the progression of the people as a whole. And that's actually something that we see amongst intellectuals even today. They love using big English and words that we don't understand just to try and make all of these concepts seem deeper than they are, and then they actually contribute nothing to society. Most of them are just drunkards or homosexuals or whatever they are. They contribute nothing to society, and then they walk around enjoying the fact that people call them smart. Now that type of education is very dangerous when the smartest person in the room can't change a light bulb. The smartest person in the room can't figure out why this car won't start. So your intellect is wasted on issues of little to no relevance. So the Bantu education system actually sought to upgrade our intelligence from being these doctors and lawyers that we produced thousands of in the 50s to a different class of people who can actually get things done with their own hands, because that's how you fix a country. Man, look at the country that we live in now. We cannot fix our potholes. We don't know how to fix the issue of electricity because most South Africans just don't have any practical skills to speak of. Most South Africans have no practical skills. Most men nowadays will pay for every service and they'll let other men come into their house to come and do other services for them. I don't think that that's a good position to be in, considering that we're not rich. Perhaps if we were all royalty, that would be a different case. But that's not the case right now. So the reason why I'm bringing up the Bantu Education Act is because it is a very crucial catalyst that later on, as we're going to see, brought about extremely, extremely important political events in South Africa, like the Soweto uprising that later on took place, where we saw Hector Peterson be shot. These are all things that stemmed from the Bantu Education Act. And then also there was another thing that happened later on in the timeline that led to these two things being catalysts of one another and then leading to a strike in the Soweto uprising. But all right, now we get into the most interesting part of it all. Thank you to everybody that has stuck with me so far, because this is where we're really starting the juicy parts. Make sure that you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you do share this channel with whoever else needs to hear this type of information. YouTube is, of course, limiting this type of information. It's extremely sensitive, but it is extremely important for all of us to know it. So let's come to the year 1959. You guys know me, I'm an artist. And the reason why I'm an artist is because a gentleman called Fela Kuti did say that music is the principle of all other professions, because even your president has a favorite song, even the hardened war criminal has a favorite song. So if you know that about music, then you know that there's no greater influence than people who write songs. These people can keep their message reverberating in your subconscious without much effort. So all the people who have been the rulers of the world since Roman Empire, they understood that you have to have a hold over the gladiators, the performers, and the entertainers in order for you to control the narrative in the country. So this is not something new. In South Africa, in the year 1959, first all black musical was produced. It was called the King Kong musical, right? King Kong was a musical about a gentleman called Ernest Dlamini. He was a boxer, ended up murdering his wife due to difficulties in life, etc., etc. But it was just a play. The most important thing about this play is the cast members and the sponsors of the play. Now, if you understand the relationship between the sponsor of a play and the actors on the play, you do know that the actors do anything that the actors do anything the sponsor requires off of them, right? So it's very important to know who sponsors what as you are watching it, so that you can ascertain what is the point of the message that you are being fed. So now, focus. 1959 King Kong musical. This was a musical funded by Clive and Irene Manel. These are South African mining billionaires of a company called Anglo Val, if you guys don't know. So during the airing of this particular musical, well, we'll call it the staging of this musical because it wasn't on airs, a gentleman by the name of Nelson Mandela attended in 1959. Wake up! Wake up! 1959. Nelson Mandela attended this play called King Kong. It was in Johannesburg. The people who sponsored this play to happen were Clive and Irene Manel, South African mining billionaires. Do you understand? Founders of Anglo Val. Right. So in this production, it will interest you, especially the people who are a little bit older, who are part of this live stream right now. It will interest you to know who was a part of the cast. Have a look at that. So King Kong was a musical funded by Clive and Irene Manel, South African mining billionaires, prominent artists who then emerged from King Kong. These were people who were nobodies before this play. Then after this play, they were touring London. They were human rights activists. They were giving speeches on the political direction of South Africa. They were basically the voice for what was going on in South Africa due to their newfound fame from this King Kong musical. Now check it out. Who were the cast members? Hugh Masekela. If you know Hugh Masekela, please drop a like on this video. Drop a thumbs up in the comments right now. If you know any of the people that I'm going to mention right now. Hugh Masekela, Miriam Makeba, Caiphas Semenya, Letta Mbulu, Jonas Ngwangwa, Thandi Klassen, Sophie Mgcina, Hazel Futa, Ben Masinga, and Stephen, I can't even pronounce that. I'm not even going to hold you. And I guess he wasn't that successful because I know all the other people. So these South African mining billionaires in the year 1959 invested in a play called King Kong, a play which took virtually unknown people from the streets, put them on stage, made them superstars, and they were touring London. And on the nights that this show was launched, Nelson Mandela was present. This was, of course, in the year 1959. This was before Mandela went to serve his 27-year sentence. Right. So I think that this is very important because it's going to show you how the narrative ended up being controlled down the line. Now, remember when I started this video, I said something to you. I said that this gentleman over here, he was the head of propaganda. He was the head of propaganda for the apartheid regime. Propaganda, in simple terms, is what we call the media today. Propaganda is people that control the message, weaponize the language around certain events to change your view of them. So let's see. This is a gentleman called Father Trevor Huddleston. As you can see, Father Trevor Huddleston was a missionary. Guys, I hope you're seeing right now that there are two sides developing to this. I haven't even spoken about any black resistance. I haven't even spoken about any of the liberation movements. No PAC, no Azapo, no AIDS. Right now, I'm just speaking about the international powers present. So it's missionaries slash globalists on one side, and then it's Afrikaners slash apartheid slash nationalists on one side. And then that's the battle stage set. These are the two people who are actually fighting for control over this country. So the missionaries come from England, they had a dual citizenship, and their allegiance was to the British crown. And even in how they educated the black students and even how they presented the story of Jesus Christ, their aim was to grow the seed in their minds that most of our black students were, shall I say, oppressed and needed freeing from a difficult situation. So that's how their education was structured. And if you can see here below, that is actually Hugh Masekela that you're seeing there. He just received his first ever saxophone. He plays a trumpet or saxophone, I'm not even sure. But that was Hugh Masekela's first ever saxophone or trumpet that he received from Father Trevor Huddleston. So he was the one even controlling his musical talents. So think about this. In the same way that I told you that MT, Java, Saudi, and Amanda Black, Aries can't speak out against the ANC because they were created by them, and their message will seek to promote anything that the ANC endorses. This is nothing new. This is a tactic which was adopted long ago because, as you can see, the cast of King Kong all turned out to be global superstars. All of these people ended up being global superstars, and not just global superstars, but politically vocal global superstars. I remember a lot of speeches by Miriam Makeba at the United Nations. She goes to the United Nations. She speaks about the inhumane conditions being suffered by South Africans. She wasn't even here, though. She was living all over the world. But all of these people who were part of the King Kong musical in 1969 turned out to be extremely influential, powerful political activist voices in South Africa. Oh, Hugh Masekela, oh, Miriam Makeba, your Caiphus Semenya, your Leta Mbule, they made the songs that were the soundtrack to our lust for freedom, right? But you need to understand how and why they were doing that. So please take note of these two names. Please take note of these two names, Clive and Irene Menel. Please take note of those two names because that's where the secret plan to destroy, destabilize, and dominate South Africa starts. Please take note of those two names, Clive and Irene Menel, because later on you're going to find out what's their connection to Cyril Ramaphosa, what's their connection to Nelson Mandela, what's their connection to the ANC, and how they right now are calling the shots behind the scenes. Please make sure that you like this video, subscribe to this channel, guys. YouTube is, of course, limiting this type of content. I will keep saying that YouTube is limiting this type of content. Please make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone else that needs to know this, because this is unfiltered information. information that does not care about your feelings. This is information that seeks to educate you, and then you can make your own choice as to how you feel about the information. But I want you to not be confused by any of the actions that are taken by the African National Cartel or our president Cyril Ramaphosa. You need to understand that everything started decades ago. Everything that we are experiencing now is merely just decades long planning. Let's go a bit deeper. Cool. So this was 1959 when this King Kong musical was started, and as you can see, they birthed stars like Hugh Masekela, Miriam Makeba, Kefas Semenya, Letambulu, people who ended up being powerful voices, powerful mouthpieces to defend our rights against the apartheid regime. Well, at least that's what we knew, right? So moving forward, 2 years later, South Africa takes one of its bravest decisions in modern history, right? South Africa takes one of its bravest decisions in modern history, and they approach the Commonwealth to tell the Commonwealth, hey, we as South Africa are done being a satellite state. Now we want to become a republic. So in the year 1961, South Africa sought to become a republic, removing itself from the Commonwealth, removing itself from the shackles of the British Crown, finally being able to install its own president, finally being able to make its own choices as a country. Now, this was the year 1961. Guys, take notes, take notes. Clive and Irene Manel, they funded the King Kong production. The King Kong production birthed the loudest, most fierce, most prominent voices that were anti-apartheid, in that they birthed Hugh Masekela, Miriam Makeba, Letambulo, Caiphus Semenya, Jonas Ngwangwa, Tandy Klassen, and the like. Okay? Hopefully you're following. So this Clive Manel is on the side of the missionaries. Remember, I told you there are two sides involved in this war. There's the missionaries, and then there's the Afrikaners. The missionaries being internationalists, and then the Afrikaners being nationalists. Hopefully, we're all still in the same page. God bless you for joining me on this live stream. Please make sure that you like this video. Please make sure that you do subscribe to this channel. Very, very important conversations need to be had. All right. So in 1961, South Africa became a republic. This was the beginning of a sort of independence. And then 3 years later, the president who had made South Africa a republic made it independent from the international powers. He then says something extremely shocking, I would say. I would say that this was shocking. I would say that this was kind of taboo for people at the time. But he says he wants to launch an investigation into the interference by the Freemasons or possible foreign influence within his party. So, this is where, for the first time, they acknowledge that there's a war going on. The Afrikaner nationalists are saying that they are launching an investigation into their own party because they suspect that foreign influence has infiltrated them through the use of a secret society such as the Freemasons. This was in 1964 rather, when the president, Hendrik Verwoerd, launched the investigation. Now, what happened after that was actually pretty scary. In 1966, this gentleman, Hendrik Verwoerd, was assassinated. Right 2 years after launching an investigation into the foreign influence through foreign secret societies such as the Freemasons, he got killed. 2 years later, he got murdered. So there was the first assassination attempt in which the gun went off and he didn't lose his life. And the second assassination was actually successful by Dimitri Tsafendas, who killed him in the South African parliament. So this is proof that there's a war going on. 2 years before, he had told you, listen, I think that there are international powers that are influencing the Afrikaner movement. And right after he said that, he got killed. Now, if you think about where we started the video with the Bantu Education Act and how the weaponization of language had the whole intention of the act misconstrued by the masses. People didn't understand the act at all, but today what we're seeing is we're seeing the impacts of the rejection of that act in real time. But what I'm trying to paint for you is a timeline of how these things were happening as there were two powers that were battling against each other, and South Africa being the battleground, and unfortunately, sometimes the South African natives being collateral damage. As we saw in 1974, the apartheid government went even more and they said, listen, we're issuing a decree that Afrikaans needs to be included in South African schools, 50% tuition language, and the other 50% can then be left to English. Reason being, they were trying to limit the amount of international influence that could be wielded on the minds of young, impressionable South Africans. So they chose to now have Afrikaans as a part of the mediums of instruction. Now, what has always confused me was the uprising. So the uprising, for me, I used to think that, hey, the reason why Black people were rising up against the Afrikaner decree was because they were maybe learning in their own native languages and full time, and they did not want to include Afrikaans in any sense. But I was shocked to learn that people were already studying in English full time, and they somehow didn't recognize the English as being oppressors to them. People didn't think of the English people as being oppressors to them. They looked at them as like, oh, okay, you know what? I'll study in English. It's fine because it's an international language. I can go anywhere. I can go to Oxford University. I can go to wah. But that's already showing you that you don't, they're preparing you to not want to be in your country. If they're saying learn English over Afrikaans because if you know English, then you can travel and go and work in other countries. They're basically weaponizing language and preparing your mind to say, don't want to be patriotic and stay and build your own country. Go explore the world, test out all these ideologies, leave the country the way that it is. At least that's my view. So I never kind of understood the revolt from the point of view of saying that we don't want to use the language of an oppressor. It's pretty disingenuous to say that, considering that the English are not black like you either. So what was really happening here is that there were greater forces at play that were using these students. Rest in peace. Rest in peace to Hector Peterson, who got shot as he was being used as collateral damage, as a war that was being fought at a higher level than he himself understood. He was just being used as a pawn. I don't even want to go into who took the picture of this, the picture of Hector Peterson, because he worked for a certain publication called The World. The World was also a publication which was an internationalist publication, one which was on the side of the missionaries. So everything seems to come right back full circle. Like the English missionaries that were the internationalists and the Afrikaners were the nationalists. And it seems that that was the war that was actually going on. And so the internationalists got wise. They're like, okay, we defeated the Boer in war, but the Boer still came back in 1918, somehow managed to infiltrate our government and take power again. So they decided to throw their weight fully behind the natives because the natives are larger in numbers, we know the terrain better, and we were likely to put up a greater fight against the nationalists as opposed to them because they had varying interests. They still got to take care of all the other colonies as well as this colony. So that was one of the reasons why they decided to throw their weight behind the natives, which brings us to a very important point after 1976 and the Soweto uprisings. After the 1976 Soweto uprisings, which were clearly, in my view, sorry, YouTube, but in my view, clearly, they were instigated by a higher power which was trying to destabilize the country. So in 1977, they formed the Urban Foundation. Now, as you can see here, finally, we see a picture of somebody that we know. This is a gentleman called Cyril Ramaphosa. This is a picture of him and Harry Oppenheimer. That's another name to add to our list, right? So we have Clive Manel, we have Irene Manel, now we have Harry Oppenheimer, right? Harry Oppenheimer was the founder of the Urban Foundation. The Urban Foundation was basically, excuse me, the Urban Foundation was basically a foundation which identified young future leaders in South Africa, whether through the arts or in sports or in academia, and they would take them, they would give them bursaries to try and make sure that their young, impressionable minds carried the doctrines that represented the Urban Foundation, right? So, as you can see in this picture, this was the induction of Cyril Ramaphosa, where he was finally chosen to become a member of the Urban Foundation. And this was in 1977. And by 1978, he was a member of the board. Okay? So this Urban Foundation was founded by the same Clive and Irene Manel who funded the King Kong play that I just showed you. The King Kong play that birthed the stars, Hugh Masekela, Miriam Makeba, that birthed the Leta Moody or Kaifa Semenya. That same production, King Kong, that was funded by Clive and Irene Manel, those same people also founded the Urban Foundation in partnership with Harry Oppenheimer and Anton Rupert. And through the Urban Foundation, they recruited Cyril Ramaphosa into the foundation, and then they gave him a position on the board. Guys, stick with me right here. We are having extremely important conversations. This is not one of those. It's not one of those. We're not playing here. It's one of the real ones, right? So, why did they recruit Cyril Ramaphosa? Very, 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 very important. Guys, please don't forget to like this video. Please make sure that you subscribe to this channel. Extremely important conversations will continue to be had. Remember, YouTube is trying to silence these types of conversations because they are very sensitive. History, teaching people about things that perhaps they don't want them to know. So please make sure that you like this video. Please make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Please make sure that you do share the link to anyone that should be listening to this and is not listening to it right now because of whatever reasons they are. All right. So in 1979, this Urban Foundation used their power to lobby. So, guys, we spoke about lobbying, and lobbying is when businesses get together, raise a bunch of money, they buy some politicians, and they convince them that they should try and draft a new law into being. So, it's just a way of pressuring the government to do whatever you want it to do. So, the Urban Foundation recruited Cyril Ramaphosa to put him on the board, and then they lobbied the government for something called the Vihan Commission. So the Vihan Commission was, as we know, it's just another tool for them to try and strong arm the government to recognize black trade unions. Now, stop right there. Why would the owner of a mine, giant mining company, Harry Oppenheimer, as well as Clive and Irene Manel, why would they advocate for the recognition of black trade unions? Because trade unions are supposedly meant to fight for the rights of workers, right? So why would they start a foundation, take a black person, put them in the foundation, and then after that, they would lobby the government to recognize black trade unions, and then take the same black person and make him the head of the Council of Unions of South Africa? So Cyril Ramaphosa became the legal advisor of the Council of Unions of South Africa after the Vihan Commission was successful in lobbying the government to recognize black trade unions. I hope you're recognizing the underhanded chess that is being played here, because this is not your normal type of moves that are easy to understand. So in 1980, the Council of Unions of South Africa was formed, and Cyril Ramaphosa was then placed as a legal advisor. of this Council of Unions. And then this Council of Unions basically had different, what should I say, different bodies that were attached to it. And one of them was the National Union of Mine Workers. So now it's bringing you to why would Harry Oppenheimer and Manel, owners of big mines, why would they support the recognition of black trade unions? They would only support it because they knew that through Cyril Ramaphosa, who they had already put into their urban foundation team, he was going to chair the National Union of Mine Workers, and therefore they would be able to control the negotiations in a way that wasn't so obvious. Because Cyril Ramaphosa was looking like a very powerful unionist. However, he was just placed there by Harry Oppenheimer and Clive and Irene Manel, as well as Anton Rupert. So, very, very important to understand, because this is then going to end up being the merging point between Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC later on, because he wasn't always an ANC member, but he was always a role player for the people who make the decisions, who control the ANC and himself. Right. So let's carry on here. So in 1987, basically, this is where he got most of his power. He organized this other fake strike for days. The workers didn't go to work, and the Chamber of Mines supposedly lost millions. And that's what made um, Cyril Ramaphosa to gain such favor amongst the workers, because they believed that he was actually one of them. They believed that he was the one who advocated for them to be able to get higher wages. Now, if you don't understand what's happening, let me paint it out for you, right? There are two sides fighting here, internationalist and a nationalist. The internationalists are using the natives to fight their war against the nationalists because they believe that the natives have a few advantages, such as being plenty, understanding the land more than the, the other group, the nationalists, and also they believe that they were easier to control. Honestly speaking, if you go down and you study eugenics, you will find that most of these people are of the belief that black people or darker races are easier to control. So what happened is, due to the Afrikaans government's laws that were meant to favor and empower Afrikaans people, Afrikaners were earning exorbitantly high um, salaries at these mines, doing jobs that black people could also do. So when these mine owners sat down and thought, remember, they're not Afrikaans. These mine owners are all immigrants. They're all Jewish immigrants from either Latvia or the Czech Republic. If you go and check where do these people come from, starting from the Manels, checking Harry Oppenheimer, you will find that these are immigrants, people who come from outside of South Africa, Jewish immigrants from whatever country they come from. So remember, they are not Afrikaners. So when they sit down and they are the owners of these um, mines, they sit down and they think, okay, why are we paying this Afrikaner man to do a job that this Tswana man can do? Because this Tswana man can do the same job, but he can do it at 80% the price that this man is charging us. So I think the best thing we can do, let's advocate for the rights of Tswana people to take the jobs of Afrikaans people, so that once they take the jobs, we can give them the job and then give them a reduced salary. It works out for us because at the end, it means that I get to save on the amount of wages that I am paying these Afrikaner people. But then at the same time, I still get the same amount of productivity. And thirdly, it fights my political goal of weakening the strength of my opponent. Because in reality, the internationalist globalist powers are enemies to the Afrikaner nationalist powers. So when Cyril Ramaphosa was introduced into the picture, they got him to be the most powerful unionist that's going to fight for the rights of all black people. Once the rights of all black people were fought for, the Afrikaans people would have to then leave their jobs so that the black people could take over. But the black people, in their euphoria, are going to miss the fact that they're being paid much less than their Afrikaans counterparts. But that's the deal that Cyril Ramaphosa has struck for them. So this deal gave him immense power because the people on the ground believed that their economic situations were in fact improved by the sharp negotiation skills of Cyril Ramaphosa. But what they actually lacked in understanding was that he was a pawn in a greater game to destabilize their other opponent, the opponent that they had basically limited ways of dealing with since the scorched earth tactics that they applied in the Second War. Right. So once the National Union of Mine Workers had about 344,000 members, and he struck this deal and he got them their wages to be raised. The same Manel family, remember where they know Mandela from. Mandela visited, or he came to watch the King Kong musical play. He was present and was watching the King Kong musical play. So when he was released from jail, and the Manels, who were the owner of the Urban Foundation, came to him and told him, listen, we have a gentleman called Cyril Ramaphosa, and we need him to be a part of the ANC. Look at this. He already has 344,000 people who are loyal to him because of the deals that he had made for them with the mining bosses. So it was very easy for them to build an in for Cyril Ramaphosa to come into the ANC because simply they just said, no, we are trying to consolidate the black vote. So Cyril Ramaphosa came in and he made the changes that he needed to make. Not because the ANC was a real liberation movement. No, get me right. It's because there were actual people inside who still believed it was a liberation movement. So they didn't want to risk any of the voting power or the voting rights falling with them. So as a result, they had a contingency plan, and Cyril Ramaphosa was the contingency plan. Now, on a deeper level, if you want to perhaps take some time and maybe, what shall I say, investigate the origins of these gentlemen, you will find that you can link it to the previous video that I just did. These gentlemen all have something in common. These internationalist, globalist billionaires all have something in common. And they all seem to have a certain ethnicity in common, and they all seem to have a certain nationality in common, and even a certain religion in common. But they are so powerful that you can't even speak about it. It's the only religion that you can't speak about because once you speak about it, it has a term attached to it. They call you anti. I can't even say it because YouTube is going to limit the video as they have done in the previous video as well. So I want you guys to spend some time listening to this video and understanding the depth of which this war is being fought by the internationalist and the nationalist powers. I am not advocating for a certain power over another power. Get me right. But what I am saying is that we need to also be cognizant as a people that these powers are separate, they have different aims. Whilst on that tip, in closing, Orania. Why is there such an effort to make Black people hate Orania? Why is there such a concerted effort, an orchestrated effort to make sure that we despise Orania and we consider it the hub of racism? We should be thinking about how did these people, such a small population, a small number of people, come together, create resources for themselves. I'm talking about universities, I'm talking about schools, I'm talking about water systems. How did they manage to be independent of the South African government and achieve that? Because we as Black people are crying about the South African government, and so are white people. But the government is continually driving the racism narrative so that we are never able to learn from these people. We don't have to like them, but we can learn from them because we share same enemy. We all want this country, we all want this nation to be ours and no one else's. And then the government seems to want to share this nation with every single other country. And they want to convince us that it has something to do with their agreements that they made during the times that they were in exile. We were never in exile. It has nothing to do with us And we cannot sit back and suffer the consequences of the decisions that they made. I don't give a damn about any of these men. So, um, basically, if they really wanted to fight, they would have been here in South Africa putting up an actual armed resistance instead of going out, crossing borders, and calling themselves commanders in chief of military wings that have never been engaged in an actual war. But don't worry, guys. Thank you very much for joining me for this live stream. Sorry for being away for a little bit. I was a bit unwell. But please make sure that you like this channel. Please make sure that you subscribe to this channel and make sure that you share it with anyone else that might need to hear this information. And YouTube is not going to share it with them because it is sensitive information. Please make sure you like this video. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel. Without any further ado, this is your boy Flex Rabaizi. God bless you. I love you, man.